The galaxy was vast, but for centuries humanity had made it their own. It was said that from the core world to the outer fringe, the presence of mankind was like a radiant web stretching across the stars. An empire, built on progress, united, under the rule of Emperor Hogarth, had flourished in an age of unprecedented exploration and colonization. But as humanity grew, so did its enemies. The Bruiks came without warning, like shadows out of the deep abyss, striking hard, fast, and without mercy. They were an alien race evolved from deep-sea predators on the oceanic world of Gaul. Physically imposing, towering over most humans, their forms were an amalgamation of muscle, armored scales, and sinewy tendrils. Their eyes were cold, reminiscent of creatures that knew only the darkness of the deep, and their motivations were similarly opaque. When they launched their onslaught against humanity, it was less a declaration of war and more like a slaughter. The Bruik's glassing of planets, obliterating entire worlds with relentless orbital bombardment, was swift and decisive. The Emperor himself fell in an assassination that struck at the heart of humanity's spirit, his death broadcast across the Empire as a symbol of their vulnerability. Despair spread like wildfire, and humanity's once glorious empire found itself teetering on the brink of collapse, its people scattered and in disarray. Acrone Tonzic had always been a survivor. Growing up in the dusty fringe colonies, he knew what it meant to make do with scraps, to build from the remnants of others' success, and to fight for every inch of progress. As a salvager, Acrone learned how to turn the ruins of the past into something useful, how to see value where others saw only waste. But nothing could have prepared him for the day the Bruiks came to all tracks. The attack was swift, the deep blue skies turning crimson as Birking's ships rained death from above. Acrone's world burned, the cities reduced to ash, and the once lively fields were trampled under the feet of monstrous invaders. He watched in horror as everything he had ever known was torn away. Family, friends, and the community he had helped build with his own hands. The Bruiks moved with precision, their aquatic forms navigating the chaos with an eerie grace, their cold eyes betraying nothing as they destroyed everything in their path. Explosions tore through the streets, buildings collapsing under the relentless assault. Acrone could hear the cries of the wounded, the screams of those who could not escape. The stench of burning metal and flesh filled the air, and his lungs ached as he ran through the chaos, his heart pounding in his chest. But even amidst the flames and screams, Acrone refused to die. He found himself among the few survivors, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the invaders to leave. When the Bruiks finally departed, leaving behind only desolation, Acrone emerged from the ruins, broken but not defeated. His body ached, his heart heavy with loss. But in that moment, a fire ignited within him, a resolve that would not be extinguished. He rallied the survivors, miners, farmers, engineers, and children who had never known war until that moment. Together, they escaped in scavenged ships, barely more than a fleet of rusted hulks and salvage freighters. They were a ragtag group, but Acrone was determined. He knew they couldn't face the Bruiks in open battle. The Empire's greatest fleets had already tried and failed. The Bruiks' advanced technology, their ability to command the seas of their homeworld and adapt that tactical mindset to space warfare, made them superior in every aspect. No, this fight wouldn't be won by meeting strength with strength. Acrone's mind turned to asymmetric warfare, to hit-and-run tactics, sabotage, and turning the enemy's own strength against them. The idea wasn't to win outright. It was to survive, to endure, to find a way to fight when everything else seemed lost. He took inspiration from history, from guerrilla fighters on Earth, from the rebels who resisted the mighty armies of the empires long forgotten. Their first victory was small. A supply ship intercepted on the edges of a dead system. The Bruiks hadn't even considered it a target worth guarding. Acrone and his people boarded it, capturing the supplies they needed and salvaging alien tech. It was there that they got their first glimpse into how the Bruiks' weapons worked. Plasma lances, energy shields that could repel even the most concentrated assaults. The battle to take the supply ship was intense, a frantic struggle through dimly lit corridors, with plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Acrone led the charge, his heart pounding as he moved from cover to cover, firing his salvage blaster. The Bruiks fought back with brutal efficiency, their armored forms shrugging off most small arms fire. The corridor was a nightmare of flashing lights, smoke, and the screams of the dying. Acrone's team moved with the desperation of people who had nothing left to lose. He knew their best chance was to catch the Bruiks off guard, to hit them fast and hard before they could regroup. The team used every trick they had. Explosives rigged to door panels, improvised EMP grenades, and even the ship's maintenance drones reprogrammed to attack. The Bruiks were relentless, their movements almost mechanical as they pushed back against the human intruders. Acrone's ears rang from the constant gunfire, his eyes stung from the acrid smoke, but he pushed forward, each step fueled by the memory of what had been lost. When they reached the ship's control room, Acrone knew they had only moments to act. The Bruik would send reinforcements soon, and they had to secure the ship before that happened. He planted the charges along the bulkheads, the timer ticking down as they fought off the last of the Bruik defenders. The explosions were deafening, the shockwave knocking him off his feet, but when the dust settled, they had done it. The ship was theirs. Acrone and the engineers worked night and day, reverse engineering the captured technology, adapting it to their own ships. The learning curve was steep, but every step forward was a testament to human ingenuity. They developed new weapons that could cut through the Bruik's scales and energy shields that could withstand their brutal assaults. They learned how to strike where it hurt the most, how to sever supply lines, and how to make the cost of every advance unbearably high for the Bruiks. Their next mission was even riskier, a raid on a Bruik's communications outpost. Acrone knew that disrupting their communications would give humanity a chance to regroup, to coordinate. The Resurgent, as they now called themselves, approached the outpost under cover of darkness, using the electromagnetic interference of a nearby pulsar to mask their presence. Acrone led his strike team through the facility, each step fraught with danger, every corner a potential ambush. The Bruiks were relentless, their defense automated turrets and sentries almost catching the humans more than once. The battle inside the outpost was a brutal close-quarters fight. The Bruiks defended every inch, their tendrils lashing out with bone-crushing force. Acrone's team fought with grim determination, their movements precise and coordinated. The plasma bolts lit up the narrow hallways, the walls scorched and pitted from the constant exchange of fire. Acrone felt the strain in every muscle, his body pushed to the limit as they advanced, inch by bloody inch. They used the environment to their advantage, rerouting power, sealing off sections of the outpost to isolate and overpower the Bruiks. But the cost was high. Every meter they gained was paid for with the lives of his people. Acrone watched as comrades fell, their bodies crumpling under the weight of the Bruiks' attacks. The pain of loss was a constant companion, but he couldn't afford to stop. They had to succeed, or all of this would be for nothing. When they finally reached the central control room, Acrone and his team were battered, their armor scorched and their weapons running low on charge. They planted the charges, and when they blew, the outpost communications array crumbled, sending a shockwave of hope to humanity. They had struck a blow that could not be ignored. In the darkness of space, Acrone's group grew. More survivors joined. People who had lost everything. Soldiers left stranded after losing their fleets. Pilots who had nowhere else to go. They called themselves the Resurgent, a name that became synonymous with defiance. Acrone became their leader, not by proclamation, but by action. He fought alongside his people, stood with them on the deck of battle-scarred ships, and shared in their victories and losses. The tide began to turn. The Bruiks, once an unstoppable force, found themselves harried at every corner. The Resurgent had become a thorn in their side, one they could not ignore. The once scattered remnants of humanity had become a coordinated force, striking the Bruiks where they were weakest, exploiting every vulnerability. Acrone's strategic mind had proved invaluable. His ability to predict the Bruik's next moves was almost uncanny. He had studied them, learned their tactics, and had become the hunter rather than the hunted. The key turning point came at the Battle of Korthos Rift. The Bruiks had set up a staging ground there, amassing ships to launch an attack that would have crushed the last remnants of organized human resistance. Acrone led the resurgent into the heart of the enemy formation, using the debris fields of shattered moons and dead ships to mask their approach. When they struck, it was with a fury the Bruiks had not anticipated. Precision strikes against command ships, coordinated EMP blasts that disabled their shielding, and focused assaults on their carriers. The battle raged for days, and the losses were staggering. The Korthos Rift became a graveyard of ships, the wreckage of human and Bruik's vessels drifting through the void. Acrone watched friends die, ships torn apart by plasma fire, and entire squads lost in the cold void of space. The vacuum of space was filled with the flashes of energy weapons, the shrapnel of destroyed vessels, and the silent screams of those who perished. Acrone himself took to the field, his ship dodging through the chaos, leading strike teams against the Bruik's flagships. He saw the enemy up close, their monstrous forms fighting to the last, and he met them with unyielding determination. The resurgent fighters danced through the debris, their smaller size giving them an edge in the cluttered battlefield. Bruik's capital ships unleashed devastating salvos, plasma bolts tearing through the darkness, but Acrone's forces were relentless. They struck at weak points, coordinated attacks that overwhelmed the Bruik's defenses. Acrone's ship, the Phoenix's Wrath, led the charge, its cannons blazing as it tore through Bruik's vessels. The bridge was a flurry of activity, Acrone barking orders, his crew moving with practiced precision as they navigated the chaos. Through it all, the resurgent pressed on, refusing to yield. By the end, the Bruik's fleet lay in ruins, their command shattered, and humanity had its first true victory, one that resonated across the stars. News of the victory spread, and with it, hope. More humans came out of hiding, more worlds began to resist, and the Bruiks, once so confident in their superiority, found themselves facing a foe that refused to die. Acrone knew that they had to press the advantage, that they had to take the fight to the Bruik's home world if they were to ever end this war. The journey to goal was perilous. The Bruiks defended their world with a fervor born of desperation. Acrone and the resurgent fought through blockade after blockade, pushing ever closer to the heart of their enemy. Each battle was a test of endurance, each victory bought with blood and sacrifice. The closer they got, the fiercer the resistance became. Goal was their final bastion, and the Bruiks would not give it up without a fight. The final approach to goal was a gauntlet of fire. The Bruiks had fortified the orbital defenses, their ships positioned in tight formations, creating layers of overlapping fields of fire. The resurgent launched their attack, the sky ablaze with the exchange of weapons fire. Acrone's ship led the vanguard, its shields flaring under the impact of enemy fire. But they pressed on, their cannons blazing. The battle was chaotic, the lines between friend and foe blurring, as the void became a storm of energy blasts and missile trails. Acrone's heart pounded as the Phoenix's Wrath broke through the Bruik lines, the ship shaking under the impact of a near miss that sent shockwaves rippling through the hull. "All power to forward shields!" he shouted, his voice barely audible over the alarms blaring through the bridge. His crew moved with determination, their faces set in grim focus as they pushed the ship to its limits. Ahead lay the Bruik Emperor's fortress, a massive structure built into the ocean itself, surrounded by storm clouds and the churning waters of gold. The Bruik's Emperor, a creature of immense size and power, stood before Acrone in the depths of the fortress. The two leaders faced each other, one born of the deep sea, the other forged in the fires of resistance. The fortress was a labyrinth of flooded chambers, the air humid and stifling, the walls slick with algae and bioluminescent growths. Acrone could feel the oppressive weight of the ocean above, the immense pressure bearing down on them. The battle was brutal, a clash of strength and will. The Emperor lashed out with tendrils that could crush bone, his roar echoing through the chamber like the fury of a storm. Acrone fought with everything he had, his armor scorched, his body battered, but his spirit unbroken. He moved with purpose, striking at the Emperor's vulnerabilities, using the knowledge he had gained from studying the Bruiks. It was a dance of survival, each movement calculated, every blow delivered with precision. The Emperor's tendrils struck with bone-crushing force, each impact sending shock waves through Acrone's body. He gritted his teeth, his vision blurring from the pain, but he refused to yield. He rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding a blow that shattered the floor where he had stood moments before. He countered with his plasma blade, the weapon cutting through the thick tendrils, the smell of burning flesh filling the air. The fight seemed endless, each second stretching into eternity. Acrone's breath came in ragged gasps, his vision blurring from exhaustion. The Emperor's roar filled the chamber, a deafening sound that rattled Acrone to his core. He could feel his strength waning, the weight of the fight bearing down on him. But he could not give up. Not now, not when everything depended on him. With a final surge of strength, he struck the decisive blow, a plasma blade driven into the heart of the Bruik's Emperor, ending the war in a single, fateful moment. The Emperor let out a final, deafening roar, his massive form collapsing, the life draining from his cold eyes. In the aftermath, the Bruiks surrendered. The terms were harsh but fair. They were to leave the human worlds, to retreat to their own system, and never again threaten the galaxy. Humanity, scarred and battered, began the long process of rebuilding. The Empire was gone, but something new had taken its place. A unity born not of conquest, but of survival, of shared struggle and sacrifice. Acrone Tonzic, once a salvager from a forgotten world, had become the symbol of humanity's indomitable spirit. He stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars, knowing that the fight had not been just for survival, but for the future, a future that was now theirs to shape. The galaxy was vast, and humanity, though bruised, was ready to rise once more. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, and now, as they looked to the stars, they knew that the future was bright, a future that they would forge together, one star at a time.